friends. Welcome back to the Sibling Summit. I am your co-host, Nolly Bongchusri, and today I am delighted for the conversation that we are going to get to share with Lelia Schott. Welcome, Lelia.
So good to be here. Hi, Sonali and everyone else.
Hmm. I'm really grateful that you're here. I'm looking forward to this conversation. A little bit of backstory for those parents joining us. Coming to this conversation was a journey for me and Lelia together. And I appreciate that journey because it took us from a conversation, it took us into a conversation that I believe with each and every cell of my body is going to be supportive of parents and is going to help um, shine a light on an area that may have been confusing around sibling dynamics before and parsing out, separating what is a normal relational challenges and what is unusual or what is different. So we are going to be talking about family of origin dynamics that impact sibling relationships. And for those of you who are getting to know Lelia for the first time, I'll introduce you quickly, Lelia, and then we're going to dive right in. What I can say about you is that I appreciate the groundedness, the warmth, and the honesty and humility that you bring to our conversations. I treasure the conversations you and I get to have, even though they sometimes are there's a time between them. And I feel like when we step into this space together, you and me together, we step into a rich, treasured rare space that I deeply appreciate. So thank you for being here.
Hmm, Thank you. These
So
meaningful conversations are so necessary, even though they might be a little uncomfortable and stir heavy emotions. We were just discussing how our goal is to help people as well as ourselves connect the dots, right? So we can make sense of what hasn't been working for us and start to change what we need to.
yeah, exactly. So if you've been like, something feels different about the struggles that my kids are having with each other than normal siblings dynamics, this conversation may be for you and may help to shine some light and connect some of those dots for you. I'm looking forward to where we're going to get to go. Lelia, I'm going to introduce you real quick. Lelia Schott is a neuro-emotional practitioner, therapeutic certified parent coach, and founder of Synergy Parenting. As a mother of six and a guide to thousands of parents around the world, she weaves developmental science, nervous system wisdom, and heart led reflection into her work. All of that is truth. And I appreciate the way that you can weave in science into the heart led spaces as well. So, why don't we start off with why is the topic of sibling relationships important to you?
Mhm. It's deeply important to me because I feel like many people, this is a generational challenge, right? If I look at my own family, I remember grandparents not getting on with siblings, parents not getting on with siblings. I myself have a very challenging relationship with some of my siblings and a really close relationship with one of my siblings. And I so want that for my own children. And yet, as I have four adult children and two tweens, I've recognized that, oh, some of their relationships are actually really challenging. And if I'm honest, it's very much to do with how we raise them. So as much as it is painful, I feel like with this information, I can work to use that pain as a portal into progress, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah, and I appreciate that. And you and I have talked about that when we see patterns that we've worked really hard not to continue in our families, because I feel very similarly. And then we see them, it's like, okay, we feel the pain of that. And it's also by seeing it, we have the ability to shift it now or work with it now. Let's go into, so you mentioned sibling, like some of your adult sibling relationships are close, some of them are not. Sibling rivalry is a common theme, competing between siblings. Can we first touch on uh, what you see as like how sibling rivalry can is actually part of having a sibling, and that's not necessarily an awful thing, right? It's actually an important part of growing. So let's touch on that first.
I would say quite boldly that I think it's often a sign of emotional safety, sibling rivalry, right? Like,
Hmm.
and from just understanding that they're emotionally immature, so many emotions feel so overwhelming for them. Having a sibling brings up so many of those emotions, like jealousy, sadness, anger, frustration. And a lot of that is around the belief that many young children have, immature people have, is that there's a scarcity, right? Of love, attention, belonging, sometimes financial resources. And you can see your sibling as a little bit of a threat, right? To that pool of resources. The other thing that I think is so normal is it doesn't necessarily feel safe to unleash or unload your emotional overwhelm onto a parent because just unconsciously you know you need that parent. And it might not feel safe to do it to a teacher because you really want the teacher to like you. And you might not do it to a friend because that relationship is still so fragile and new. But to a sibling, oh my goodness, they're always there. You know they love you. You know they're not going anywhere, right? So I think that part is all very normal. And it's such a wonderful playground for kids to learn how to feel safer with all emotions. So I think sibling rivalry is often not so much about what happens with the children, but how the caregivers, the adults, handle the sibling rivalry. Because the sibling rivalry is good, it's giving children an opportunity to learn how to handle conflict, to sit with all the difficult emotions, how to problem solve, right? This is really rich ground for them to learn these things. And we know this because um, single children often say that they struggle a little bit with these things as they get older because they haven't had the practice. Not always, but often. It's how we respond, when we play judge versus just observer, when we bring our own unhealed stuff. That's when it gets tricky.
Okay, and I love the way that you said sibling rivalry may be a sign of emotional safety. And based on, because I know where we're going in this conversation, I think that's true sometimes. And then I think sometimes parents get the tap, wait a minute, there's something else going on here. So, how can parents differentiate between what's normal and healthy and supportive sibling rivalry and where there may be something going on that's more deeply relational, that's actually like a space for us to maybe approach it differently?
Sure. I want to also say that our more highly sensitive children or our neurodiverse children, our high needs children, we want to give them a little longer. They often have kind of beef with their siblings for a variety of reasons. One, if they feel emotions more deeply, it's
Mhm.
big, right? Whereas a child that we might refer to as kind of a dandelion child, right? If we're saying that our orchid children are the more sensitive ones, they feel things more deeply, versus a dandelion child might be like water off a duck's back. I don't want to get into that too much, but it's really important to say that I've seen this as problematic because parents might see one child as being easier, even like more cooperative, or just let's also have compassion for parents. It is easier when one child is a little bit more cooperative. They share more easily, they consider their siblings' feelings and needs more naturally. When you see that empathy in your child, I think it's very it feels safe in our body when we see a child struggling to share, struggling to consider their siblings' feelings and needs. Fear can often rise up for us, especially if we've had a sibling like that or we've been a sibling like that. Um, so that's a big part of it. And now, can you repeat the question? I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, absolutely. Like, how can parents tell the difference between, and I love that you brought up the sensitive kids, and because I think what can happen too when you have that sensitive kid, they aren't able to let the small things just kind of roll off their back, so to say, like others are able to do, those orchid children versus the dandelion kids, right? So the dandelion kids might be able to let the things go, but then it might also leave them stuck. And so how can we tell the difference between what's normal sibling rivalry, normal and healthy sibling rivalry, and where there might be something more deeply relational going on?
Yes. I want to say it's the repair. We need to help them repair. In the beginning, they're going to need us to do that for them, right? And to be curious, like, I love sports casting. When you did this, I noticed you kicked, you hit, whatever. Maybe if we're talking with teens, it starts to get more and more natural, being curious about it looked like your sibling really wanted this and you wanted that. Starting to show them that two things can be true at the same time. This is really important. So for young kids, maybe it's not that easy to tell whether it's going to be a problem because with highly sensitive kids, they take longer, right? But if there are teenagers and we still see young adults and we still see that they're unable to repair, they're unable to see their sibling side or stand up for themselves, then we know that something's missing, right? So I think we have to help them with their repair when they're younger. And if they aren't able to repair when they're older, be a little bit more curious. Can you add what you think, Sonali? Like, what would you say?
Yeah, and I love that we're gonna kind of just bounce back and forth, kind of filling things in. This is a journey for both of us as well. I think there's in a way like you kind of notice a difference between there's a fight, but there isn't a pattern, like there it isn't a regular daily, like you can feel, I think there's a sensation for me. Let me see if I can articulate this. When something feels relational, like you can feel the way that it's stuck. It's like the default setting, instead of being that emotional safety that you're talking about, it's like the default setting is a shakiness. And
Yes,
so but that kind of and so I think it's when parents are like, oh, everybody says sibling rivalry is normal. So then I think parents, like, if you're feeling like, wait, something just feels off here, to trust that. And then this may be like, let's look at what may be going on, what patterns. I think when there's certain patterns at play where you notice, and it feels like maybe those moments where there's calm, you really treasure those, but you're also bracing for when it's going to be broken up, that moment of calm, and you're anticipating it, and you yourself are walking on eggshells or nervous about that happening. That might be a sign that there's something relational going on. If your default is calm in the relationship and you feel your siblings have calm in the relationship with sometimes some disruptions coming in, that's very different from the normal state is not so safe, but sometimes they get calm.
yes. I love that. And the stuckness, right?
Yeah.
When they're able to have maybe those soft tears and when it just stays hard, and when you can feel that one child or both children or many children, but it's often one child views their siblings as, you can tell in their nervous system, their siblings are a threat to their
Yeah.
well-being
Yeah.
or to their connection with a parent, or yes, it feels
Yeah.
very rigid and very
Yeah.
conflicted.
Yes. Like, let's say you might say no to something with one child and then they go and lash out on their sibling. Now, if that happened once in a while, that's very different from, oh, you know this pattern. And the moment you say no to your child, you're like, ooh, I hope they don't go snap at their sibling, right? Like, that would be the difference. So, yeah, that's how I see it, is like, is the default setting steady stableness? And then sometimes we dip into a conflict or a moment that's challenging, or is it default more challenging, but sometimes we get calm? So,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. Could we go into, because the title of this conversation is Family of Origin Dynamics That Impact Sibling Relationships. Would you be willing to share about your experiences with growing up in a family? And you and I talked about this, like oftentimes what I've noticed is I'm like, oh my gosh, I see this pattern now. I had no idea because I was in it. And so like unwinding from our own patterns in our family of origin and then also being able to support our kids at the same time, I think is very different from when you don't have your own patterns in your family of origin to unwind from, or maybe you saw what a healthy sibling relationship looks like. So when we go to that, what were your experiences with your siblings growing up that have influenced what goes on in your home now?
Okay. Okay. Um, um, I'm the eldest of five, and I have one biological sister, and we are close, but we weren't always. So, and then I have a step, and I have many steps, and I have two halves that I grew up with. But I want to just say that I've noticed so many of the patterns that we had were generational. Like, if I've been curious over the years, listening to my parents talking about their relationships with their parents, I realized that having a favorite was always a theme. One child was chosen to be sort of the role model, and everyone was look up to this child because this child is often academic, or depending on which side, whichever values parents held in high regard, that's what that sibling represented. So I've looked so much into family roles and realized that's what it really was. But another
Mhm.
part of it for me, I think, was emotional immaturity on the part of the adults. So I want to be really respectful when I'm sharing and thinking about how my siblings would feel if they heard this. And so I want to be really responsible with the information. But I know that these patterns are very familiar for lots of people. And the one thing that I see happens often in blended families is that the parents don't treat all children the same. So I was very much seen as a threat to my half siblings because things like money were discussed, right? We can't get this because dad had to pay maintenance to your mom. Those kind of conversations. And it sounds so obvious now to be like, oh my gosh, that's really unhealthy. But I know for a lot of people in blended families that these conversations take place, and it's too much. So it's the unloading of emotional overwhelm from parents onto children. And then these young children without the emotional maturity to handle this that then start to blame and project and to, I suppose, like demonize and or victimize and angelize. It's that huge comparison, like you're good, you're bad, right? Or
Yeah.
you're easy, you're a problem.
Yeah.
These huge comparisons.
Yeah. Can I add something to what you've shared? Because
Yeah,
also thinking like if we look at what we have available to us in terms of resources today, Lelia, you and I are able to have a conversation that would not have been able to happen one generation before us, right? And so I think it's not for a lack of love. I think, and it wasn't ill-intentioned. I think it was like dynamics that have been so deeply internalized in families for generations and generations. We think we're doing what's supportive. We think we're doing what's best. And we think we're just trying to create connection. We don't even realize that we might be like putting one sibling against another. We think we're just sharing information, helping to build understanding of what's going on. And I think that's what I've noticed is like that's what's most like when we're unwinding these patterns to recognize, oh, I thought that was just being supportive. Actually, I
right.
was continuing this pattern.
Completely.
Yeah.
So I've kind of listed some of the things that I see happening not only in my family of origin, but in many of the families that I work with. And it is this giving children, assigning them a role, right? Like, you're the good child, you're the one that's easy. Talking to the child about their siblings. And I've been guilty of this myself, right? If you grow up in a family where you feel like a parent talking to you about their struggles with their partner or with their parents or with their with your siblings is connection, I think it can really be a struggle for us. Well, it certainly has been for me, and single moms as well, right? If we don't have a partner to talk to about our struggles, or we don't have a parent to talk to about our struggles, the child who listens, the child who feels to have a lot of empathy for us, it's so natural to want to
Yeah.
receive empathy and understanding. Like, you see this too, right? Like, did you see what your sibling did? Like, I'm so worried about that. Like, to share these conversations. And obviously, I know there are times when we do need to have these conversations, but I think it's when it's habitual, right? When this child now becomes the person that has to carry the emotions and be the one that empathizes and maybe feels like they have to be the peacemaker or the fixer. These roles are too heavy for children. And what I've noticed is it's equally so. I had a conversation recently with my sister that we had this conversation. I think this could be very helpful for many people listening. I felt as on one side of the family, seen as the good child, the responsible child. She helps us with all the children. She's, good at school. She's not a problem. And then on the other side, I feel I was very much a scapegoat. Um, I was sharing with my sister how heavy that was for me and how confusing that was for me, and how I still struggle in my body today to feel as though I'm always going to be in trouble. I'm never enough. I'm not good enough. And she was sharing that as the favorite, that it's actually very heavy for her as well. Feeling as though looking at me my whole life and thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want to be treated like that. I need to make sure that so both of us, just people pleasing the whole way,
Yeah.
hypervigilance, bracing for criticism, uh, fear of that love, that favoritism being removed. So,
Yep. It being withdrawn. Yeah.
so all children in these systems suffer, is what we essentially see, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's really important because I think sometimes we don't realize that, oh, if you were the one that was treated well, you might think, oh, but my mom really got along with me, or my dad really, or my family really loved me. It was my sibling growing up that was the challenge. But kids are noticing. So they notice this. I love that you and your sister were able to sit down and like kind of step back and say, huh, what was that like for you? Oh, this is what it was like for me. And it sounds like there wasn't defensiveness. It was really like, oh, we both had really similar experiences, but coming from two very different pathways. Like you were the favorite, you were not the favorite. We both lived in fear.
Mm-hmm. In raising our own children, we have a lot of conversations. It's so powerful to have somebody to do this with, to recognize, oh my goodness, even though we have the head knowledge, right? We can read a whole bunch of books and recognize these patterns and then decide, I do not want to repeat these patterns. Sadly, I still have, because I think to embody that safety in our nervous system, it takes time. It takes so much effort to recognize when I have that anxiety, to be disciplined and not thinking I need to speak to someone about it. Well, I can't talk. So I have 4 children from my first marriage, and I'm remarried, and I have 2 more. I can't always talk to my husband about my older 4 kids because I feel like he might just agree with me. And I don't necessarily want someone to just be like, oh, yes, that child's really not performing or whatever. I need someone to empathize, like, what's going on for you? Is this difficult for you? Just holding that space where I feel that I have that in my sister. She loves all my kids and she can be that for me. So I think we
Mhm.
all need that as a parent, someone we can talk to is going to mind for our feelings and needs and not necessarily just start saying, what, this child is a problem. This child is, so that demonizing and angelizing.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a real problem. Instead of thinking of children's developmental needs and people's feelings, and how those feelings can activate behavior and how they can cause children to act out in certain ways, that is crucial information to have, opposed to us just staying with, well, who are we going to blame? Who's at fault for this? And I see
Right.
that where I think the generational shift is starting to come in, as well as noticing that each child, especially the child, I love this information. especially the child that stirs up uncomfortable feelings in us, the one that we might have, 2 generations ago referred to as the scapegoat or the black sheep, right? Whichever farmyard animal we go. But that child is often a
I
gift.
never put that together. That was funny. Yes, it is. It's scapegoat or black sheep. I just needed to pause because that's hilarious, Lelia. Okay, keep going. Yeah,
That child is a gift. And
it is. Farm animals. Yeah.
this child often stirs up in the family system everything that is dysfunctional, and I
Mhm.
love how I believe it was Dr. Shafali says they just keep clanging that bell over and over again until someone pays attention. And
Yeah.
so that helps us. I don't believe our parents or our grandparents had that information. I have this
Yeah.
information now, and it helps me to respond to the children that I find triggering.
Hmm.
Very confronting, the children that can be the things that I was not allowed to be, that can say the things I would never dare, or ask for the needs that I was absolutely not allowed to have. That
Hmm.
child is such an important person in the family because if we can learn to soften and to sometimes we have to strengthen, with some of us, it's finding that sovereignty and learning how to say no and so no to the behavior, but yes to the feelings. Your feelings.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Oh, I love that like that we're talking about this. And again, like I like because we have that awareness. So when it's not saying don't get triggered by your kids or try to pretend like you're not getting triggered, it's saying there's really useful information in there. When you do get triggered, like you're starting, that is actually the starting point of unwinding family dynamics or family patterns. What I'd love to go into, if you're willing to share, and I will share as well, like some of those things where you're like, whoops, I'm continuing a pattern like that has existed that I'm actually continuing that. And for one, for me, I'm thinking of immediately is like if one child is reactive or dysregulated, having that we're like, oh, just go along with it. Like just let that be for right now. And so I watched myself silence the other siblings' voices and then learning how to support them in being able to speak up has been a challenge or an area where I've had to work on because I was like, oh, I taught them to just be quiet and tolerate it.
Yeah. Yeah. Unconsciously thinking, maybe everyone could think now. I don't know if that would be helpful for people to think, is there a pattern that I'm passing on or working so hard to not pass on? That, right? Because if we look at our nervous system, for me, I go into fight when I see, so I have one daughter from my first marriage and one daughter from my second marriage. And all my kids grew up together, like in the same home with me. So when I would see these two girls fighting and one seeing the other as a threat, I noticed that I was going towards it because I so desperately want to fix it. I was going towards it with that fight in my nervous system, trying to force them to repair. And
Mhm.
so maybe we could all think of that, is our nervous system reacting to something that reminds us of a wound, and it's not always that that we passing it on. It can be sometimes that we're working so hard to not pass it on that
Yeah.
we're not approaching it in a regulated connected way, but more kind of, for me, it's panic. It's like, oh no, oh no, this is happening again, and I've been working so hard for it to not happen. How is this happening?
Right. I need to fix it. And so we actually teach our kids and like that other, the opposite pathway, but it still leads to the place of dysregulation and fear. You know, like we're like, oh, don't fight, just be quiet. What I taught, right? Just let it go, let it go. And then you accidentally, you're still continuing that pattern in a way, in a different way.
Maybe this is very human, right? So instead of
Yeah.
seeing repeating patterns as something that we will say to ourselves. I've spoken to many young moms who would say, I just want to be, a perfect parent. I just want to pass on none of the stuff that harmed me and just do. We that's a beautiful intention and it's a good place to start, but I'm wondering if it would be better for us to just think of softening the patterns and taking responsibility for when we recognize that they are at play. Because it's really very heavy to
Yeah.
imagine in one generation we're going to just be able to fix everything. That
And I don't think it's possible either. I think we actually want to give our kids the skills to be able to step back and be like, oh, is this what I want? Hang on. Whoops, I was doing that. Okay, now how do I move forward from here? How do I make repair and how do I shift this dynamic? And I think giving them that skill of recognition, not giving them, I don't think we can give them that ideal, perfect, there's no mistakes happening here. I think more like for them to have the muscle of how to handle it when they notice something that they hadn't noticed before or when they're showing up in a way that they now realize, oh, that's not how I want to show up, and how to handle it from a place where they're not blaming or guilting or judging themselves. So that means we need not be blaming, guilting, judging ourselves when we're in that, but rather from a place of, oh, noticing it empowers me to shift it.
yeah, and a great opportunity for those listening that have parents that are still in their lives is to recognize what's going on in your body when your parent is around you and when your parent is around your kid, right? And we can see often how our nervous system will brace or for some people maybe it's calm. Like that's so beautiful, right? I would love to be that presence. My firstborn is having a baby in March, and
Mhm.
I'm going to try every time I'm near him and near his baby and the baby's mom to be that safe presence that I can help them to co-regulate. But for a lot of us, our parents are not that for us, right? They don't know necessarily how to be that. They don't know how to be in their bodies. They might not recognize what's going on for them. So for a lot of us, we can start there. Like, how does my nervous system feel when I'm around my parents? Just noticing it, maybe naming there's some fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of whatever. And seeing how we feel when we see our parent respond to our child. There's lots that comes up there very often. Would you say that's true for you?
Oh yeah, yeah, I would say that that's true. And like I had noticed for a long time, there was a lot I would tense up with those interactions. So there wasn't calm. And it's been a real process. I shared this with you that like I literally could feel in my last visit with my mom, I could feel my inner child like growing up and maturing because I was able to shift the pattern by keeping focused on like that I do want to enjoy this time and that I do feel steady and solid and secure in who I am. And so like finding my way to respond when there was uh and these were bids for connection, right? So if there was a bid for connection, that looks like criticism, right? Instead of responding to the criticism and sharing like how I could re-guide that to a place where there was genuine enjoyment and ease. And I think that's a process for all of us. And I think we do see it. Like if we feel calm and ease and relaxed in our family of origin systems, then that's what we can give our kids. And if we don't see it, those are cues that, oh, okay, how can I shift that dynamic? Not only for my kids, but how can I shift that with my family of origin? Where do I start with that?
Yeah. And what about with our adult sibling? For I've only repaired with one sibling, but for us, it was very much about noticing that we weren't enemies, that we both just really wanted to feel like we belonged and that we were loved for who we were, that we didn't want to be compared. We didn't want to compete anymore. So I'm just skipping back, realizing that perhaps people would like to notice if there is a pattern of like triangulation, right? Like if I share something, this is so big for me, I'm really, really working hard. It sounds obvious, and there's some shame that came up for me now, just admitting that I have to work hard on this when it seems like such an obvious thing to do. But when one child shares something with me, that I really keep that private, right? Because very often it's a way that people, I think also religion encourages this, like, can you pray for your sister? She's going through this. It does often come from a place of care and concern. Like maybe for mom, it feels a little too heavy for her to hold on her own. So she thinks, I'll just share this with somebody else who really cares about this person. And then
Right.
we can hold this, right? But that's
Yep.
not a lot of, yeah, not always triangulation, but for those triangulation is when, you share something with your dad and then your dad goes and shares it with your brother or whatever, and then they talk about it behind your back and you think you've shared this very thing. Or um, just pitting children up against each other.
And I think the example, I really appreciate you sharing that example because it's an example that you can see the intention is kind, the intention is good. It's just the execution kind of it puts one child against another or one in a power over, like puts them in that it's not direct communication. So there's a power over, power under dynamic. It's like, oh, would you pray for this child, right? Like, would you pray for your sibling instead of then what it does, instead of the communication being between sibling to sibling, it went through the parent. So there was like it wasn't direct communication. Or oh, I'm thinking of examples where it's like, oh, she said you said this about her, right? And I just want to help you guys solve it. And so we think we're helping, but actually it's keeping it where like triangulation is like A talks to B and B talks to C, but A never talks to C about this pattern, right?
Yeah, yeah. And
And
of
you
course
think
we
you're helping smooth things over, but it doesn't. Yeah.
Of course. And I'm coming from a place of thinking, that I always look for the parents' intention. But I know from working with people and from my own family system that sometimes it isn't. Sometimes a person has ill intention, right? That they just stirring things up. So I want to be mindful in case there's anyone listening thinking, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, oh, there's no good intention from. But
Yeah.
if we check in with ourselves, and I would like to believe that everyone makes sense, that perhaps there really is a good reason deep down in there. And if we look at fear, it's often that, right? Like, I never learned to sit with those heavy emotions. Therefore, people always put them on me. Now I'm putting them on someone else. It's often that pattern. And if we can look
Right.
for that in parents, I believe that can be very healing as well.
Yeah.
You know, our
And I
parents.
think, oh, go ahead, keep going.
No, just sometimes they may not talk about things and we can hear about it from someone else. I remember hearing about it from an aunt and realizing, oh my goodness, like the same thing happened to my parents. Like this thing that's happening to me happened to them is not always
Yeah.
in a way. What were you going to say?
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to validate what you were saying about sometimes it's really scary for us to try to see somebody's intention as good. It really feels like there's ill intention there. And like, and I know what that feels like, where I'm like, I don't even want, like, it's hard to believe or it's scary to believe because it does bring up a lot of insecurity and fear for you. And because intention and impact are not the same thing. Somebody can mean well, and the impact is still something that hurts you. So it's not, I think sometimes there's fear about, okay, seeing that the intention, because does that mean now that I have to dismiss that it really hurt me? And it doesn't mean that.
Thank you for saying that. And for anyone listening and you like triggered by this because you like, no, there's no good intention, validate that for yourself.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's what it is. It's
Yeah.
cruel, really cruel, and it's painful.
Yeah.
But if we're looking at softening generational patterns, sometimes it's anger, right? For some people, they need to feel that anger. They need to feel like this wasn't right. What happened to me was wrong. There's lots of things that happen to people. It was just wrong and they never deserved it. And that anger can fuel them to behave a different way. And other times it can be grace, right? Depending on what we're talking about. Sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, my mom just didn't know better, right? She didn't have these tools. So we really
Hmm.
need whatever emotion we have and look for how what it needs. Like, does it need validation? Does it need action?
Yeah.
Do we? Would you would you agree? Do you feel like it's
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about some of the patterns in my family and also being mindful of sharing and wanting to share in a way where we're showing that it's supportive to like let yourself be honest with yourself with where you are. And it's not about like maybe you've been someone who you're so good at seeing people's good intentions. And so maybe it's time where like by letting yourself be in the space that you are, you let yourself finally feel angry or hurt by the way that certain things happened. And that might be an important part of your process. And so it's not to try and push yourself or force yourself, and being able to hold both like that like the impact of this was hurtful or led to a lot of fear or led to disconnection, and to be able to hold that. So I know I've seen those dynamics as well where I'm like, oh, I know that this was coming from like I didn't know that it was like I just felt like it was isolating. And I love that you brought up with your sister, like you both wanted belonging. Like everybody wants belonging. And sometimes we're all scrambling to figure out how to get there. And it's a really, it can be a messy experience to find our path to how do I create belonging with real human interactions that are not going to be perfect, that where we have hurt each other or, and we also deeply care about each other.
Mhm. It's true. It's often what comes up, right?
Yeah.
When we get so, so many of our problems and our hurts, it's can we belong just as we are um, for who we are.
Right. And give yourself permission to work on things in a way that's okay for you. Like, I love it that you mentioned that, okay, I've worked on some of my like one sibling relationship, but my others, I'm not there yet. I've worked on my mom relationship and my siblings going one at a time, it would be in a way that works for me because that's being realistic with myself. It's not overwhelming myself and thinking, oh, I need to make it perfect all right away. I'm
And I
curious to
also,
hear your thoughts on that.
yeah, well, I also think that it depends on whether the sibling is in a place to work, because sometimes if it's just one-sided, or if there's things like addiction or mental health, all those things that are not being checked, then
Mhm.
for me, it feels like protection for my children now. Um, that came with a lot of grief to know that, okay, I'm not a hypocrite because I'm helping other people to repair relationship and to have, connection with their loved ones. Sometimes that's a necessary thing, and it's definitely not one that I've ever encouraged in others or in myself, but I have learned over the years that sadly that is sometimes an option. And
Yeah, because like maybe you don't have the capacity to take it on right now. And that's, like to be um reasonable with yourself or gentle with yourself about what you do have the capacity for. Yeah. Yeah.
knowing what we control, right? We can only work on ourselves. We can't force other people to work on themselves. And
Yeah.
so we've got our youngsters in our home with us now, or if we're still in connection with our adult kids, I'm so grateful that I am, then we can work on repair and listening. And what was that like for you? Um, and I'm so sorry,
Yeah.
because you're right. The intention doesn't matter. That was their experience. So I think if I can say to anyone who's listening now and thinking I have a really difficult relationship with one of my children or my children have very difficult relationship, listening is a great place to start. listening to understand, right? Not to defend.
Yeah. Oh, and I think maybe if we were to distill all the things that we're saying together into one message, I think it's like letting yourself be paced. And then even if your kid's relationship is complicated, to be able to acknowledge our part in a not judgmental way where we're not judging ourselves either. Where we're like, okay, now it's here. Let's figure out how we move forward. And it's not, and also to be realistic with what we can work on and when. And I think that applies to when our kids are young versus when they're grown up, right? What we can work on and when, and not trying to take it all on. And also letting ourselves be proud of the work that we're doing. Lelia, from our conversations, when we've talked, I'm like, wow, look at what you've done with your relationship with your sister, and that you've been able to have that awareness with your kids. And I feel that same way, but I'm like, wow, look what I've been able to do. I'm really proud of what I've been able to do. And is it perfect? Absolutely not. And am I making progress that I'm proud of? Yeah. Yeah. Would you like to, is there one final core message that you'd like to share with the parents joining us?
Something that's helped me with raising my children is to see them as these unique individuals that have, there's no coincidence that I'm their parent, right? That if I don't have a skill that they need, then this is a great opportunity for me to build that, or to find um, somebody else who can, right? For instance, one of my daughters is a dancer and I'm not. So we're going to find someone that can and build that passion in her, and I'm going to support her and I'm going to tend everything. For another child of mine who's incredibly academic, and I often can't understand what he's talking about, but to just listen and be there. And we don't have to be the same as our children. We don't always have to understand. We don't always have to have the skills that perhaps we need. But I think loving them for who they are, listening, and just growing alongside them and connecting with them in the unique ways, this has been something that I feel has been very comforting to me, that we can just do these things, right? Connect
Yeah.
with the individual and separate um, sometimes their behavior from who they are, right? Looking at that has also helped me so much. Like, a child behavior is not who they are, but looking at the feelings and the needs underneath that behavior, and then realizing that this little person's beautiful essence is who they are when they're typically regulated, when they feel connected, when they feel safe.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. And I think that's real, like that piece about like being able to distinguish the essence of who they are from maybe what they're doing in that moment, from the behaviors. Yeah. I know you also, Lelia, have a free gift. Would you be willing to share about that as well?
Yeah. I have a free coaching session for parents, or even for non-parents. I see a lot of people that aren't parents that are just working on their own inner child relationships, emotions, and I'm offering that.
That is an incredible offer, and what a gift. So please make sure to click the link on this page to take Lelia up on that offer. Be an incredible opportunity to work on our own inner children, different dynamics that we see at play, understanding bigger picture, what's going on relationally between our siblings, our kids. So thank you, Lelia, for offering that gift. And where can parents find you?
Well, I have an Instagram called Synergy Parenting, and a
Mhm.
website, leliaschott.com.
Hmm. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and your journey, and really allowing us to go into this topic about looking at sibling relationships from multiple angles, and like what's normal sibling rivalry and what might not be, what might be a signal of something like a pattern and a relational complexity at play. I appreciate this conversation. It's not an easy space, I think, for either one of us to like figure out how we're navigating this conversation. And I'm grateful to have navigated it with you and for you to share your experiences and your work and your heart and your passion for this. That comes through really clearly. So thank you for being here. And for those parents joining us, thank you so much for being here, for opening your heart and your home to this conversation. I'll see you soon. Bye.